Hi everyone, Ksenia is here, and I'm so happy to welcome all of you, to our first webinar of 2022. We're starting this year with a very useful and highly requested workshop where we will learn how to deliver sales presentations that convert. And we will be learning from one of the best, Rajiv Nathan, the founder of Startup Hypeman, sales leader and demo expert. Hi Rajiv, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Woo, and I'm so excited to get all this information that you prepared for us. So today we're going to be covering a lot of important points about demos. We will talk about why your demos fall flat and how that disseminates your average order value, how structuring your demo helps to increase conversions, and much, much more. Before we start, I want to remind all of you that if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. You can leave your questions in the chat section and Rajiv will answer them along the way, if possible, of course, and we will discuss the rest during the QA session. So let's get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. A big shout out to the Synovio team for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And thank you everyone for tuning into this live stream. Like Ksenia said, just keep dropping your questions in the chat throughout as best as possible. I'll try to answer them along the way, or if I can't answer it in the moment, we'll file it to answer it towards the end. Just please let us know as well where you're tuning in from. Would love to hear what kind of audience we've got. I can already tell it's a global audience, which is amazing. So just let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. Couple of housekeeping items. Yes, this recording, will be saved onto YouTube afterwards. That way you can have access to it for all time. And when it comes to asking questions, my only request or my ask of you is that please try to make your question something that's applicable to to most people or to everyone. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when I'll do this, I'll have someone who will ask a question that's like, so what would you do if you were specifically selling to APAC, but only 3 countries in APAC, and it was only this type of, it was only an IT company that had this many employees? What would you do in that specific situation? And obviously, it's very hard for me to tell in the moment what I would do in that situation, and that question probably does not help everyone else. So just try to ask a question that that can have a more broad answer to it, or be applicable to a broader audience. So with that said, we're going to dive right in, and I'll do a more thorough intro in a couple minutes, but I just want to dive right into today's content. My name is RajNATION. My company is Startup Hypeman, and this is Demo Calls That Don't Suck. Thank you all for being here. Let's dive right in, okay? Why most demos suck. The reality here is that they are way too product-oriented. They don't deliver a unique and compelling message because they're way too product-oriented, and as a result, expectations are mismanaged, and therefore they lack direction, right? That's the big challenge. And I'll tell you, I have personally reviewed over 100 demo calls over the last few years. So that's where a lot of this knowledge is coming from. So this is really like the big challenge that I think a lot of companies are facing. And what happens? Well, it makes buyers obsess over features and price. It makes buyers forget who you are. It makes buyers opt for doing nothing and choosing the status quo instead. And in some cases, it turns buyers all the way over to ghosting you. These are actual quotes that were heard on different calls. So obsessing over features and price, the buyer said, well, your competitor offers this extra feature and also charges 25% less. Why is your product so expensive? Or in the forgetting who you are. I was actually a client of ours who told me that he was trying to buy software for his company, for his team. And I had even actually referred a company to him. I had just been subscribing to their newsletter, and I was like, maybe they would be a good fit for you. And he couldn't even remember that company's name, the one that I had referred to him, because he had been on 6 or 7 that week and it all blended together. Right. And I think you would all agree that's kind of the definition of blending in as opposed to standing out, where they literally forget what your company's name is. And then there's, opting for doing nothing in the status quo. Right. I'm sure you've all gotten that email before where they say, we're going to table this for now. Some other priorities have come up. We'll reach out when the timing is better. And then when they ghost you, you're the one having to send the email to them. Yeah, just checking in. Have you had a chance to speak with your team about this yet? Just curious to know, like, let me know in the chat, like, you can use like obsess or forget or status or quo or ghost. Let me know which one of those things has happened to you before, just with like a one-word response. Obsess, forget, quo, or ghost. Be curious to see what's happened in your situations. So that's what happens to the buyers. And the reality is your demo should not turn away buyers or make them feel like they are settling. And I think we can all agree that, we definitely shouldn't be turning away people. But on top of that, you should be able to present and pitch and sell in a way where they feel like they are aspiring to work with you, not settling by working with you. Instead, you should be creating an experience that inspires them, right? You should be able to turn them into champions and evangelists of your brand. And I really want you to reframe sort of that, almost rethink your thought process here. What if it was not a demo? What if it was not a product demo that I was delivering? But what if instead I was inviting them to participate in my brand experience? How might that change how you go about things? And I would ask you this, like, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a demo where they feel like they're settling, or would you rather have a demo that turns them into an evangelist, that creates an experience where they want to become a champion of your brand, the champion of your cause, right? Obviously, I feel the latter is the better way. Turn them into evangelists and champions. And I want to just give you a little bit more background as to who I am that'll help kind of shape why I think in this way in the first place. And the reality is, to know me is to know that my fundamental belief about life, like the thing that drives me, the thing that gets me up every day, is that I believe everyone deserves to have a voice. And so that why, that core belief, is what fuels all of my personal and professional pursuits. And so when you're seeing me today, just know that what you're getting is the influence of someone who is a hip hop artist, who is a yoga instructor, who is a professional ring announcer for combat sports and MMA, and also the founder and chief pitch artist of startup Hypeman. But what you see in those other things, right, in being a hip hop artist, in being a yoga instructor, in being a professional announcer, right, I take all of that experience and I bring it into what we can do in sales. What can we do in this world of business to make it more interesting and to make ourselves connect better with our audience? Here's just a couple of different properties that I've been on before. Just so you know, if you like TED Talks, maybe you want to check out mine. I did it at this point. It was like 8 or 9 years ago, but it was a topic on vulnerability before Brene Brown made vulnerability cool, or at least I was not aware of who she was yet. Just search my name and TEDx, and it should come up. So that's a little bit of background on me. Now, what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about how to run these demo calls that don't suck. And I want to do that by sharing a story with you. And I want to share the story of one of our clients at Startup Hypeman, and that's the company SearchSpring and their CEO, Peter. So Peter is a e-commerce industry veteran himself. SearchSpring has been in the e-commerce space for like a dozen years. I actually cold emailed Peter a couple of years ago because I was looking at what they were doing, and I said, I think my company might be able to help. And when we met, he said, selling through demos is horrible. We're always caught in a feature battle. Just put the capital letter F in the comments if you've ever felt like you're caught in a feature battle, right? You're shucking out features. You're trying to just compete with, you're trying to prove that what you have is slightly better than what your competitors have based on these different features. That was the situation SearchSpring was in. And he was convinced that demo selling was just like, he's like, we have to do it, but it's the worst way that we could possibly be selling. And so I said, you know what? I challenge accepted. I think we can do this. I think we can actually make this a great experience for everyone involved. And I think you can end up loving this, loving how this product is sold. And I think because he saw that, that idea of creating a voice and storytelling was so much in my blood that he believed in me, and he said, all right, let's see what we can do about this. And so we kind of dug into their situation a little bit more at the start. And what we ultimately did was we created this concept that we call a story stack. I just want you to see this because a lot of these things are what ends up getting put into a good demo, but or help create a good demo. But the story stack process is what we bring to SaaS companies to really just help them get their brand in line with their sales and make that a well-oiled machine that essentially I like to think of it as a mixtape, right? And you have these different tracks on your mixtape that make up your messaging. And then you pop that in and your company's sound is playing loud and proud. And then you're able to make a real impact with others. So we created this story stack, but where we started was by like just looking at, what's going on in their situation. And the reality is all the reps had good talk and listen ratios. Like they were using a conversation intelligence recording software, right? So they all had good talk listen ratios. They all asked a healthy volume of questions, right? It's not like they were just going straight into a pitch. They all asked questions. They knew the software inside and out. And they even had a 4.9 out of 5 rating on G2, right? So the product itself was so strong. Even with all those good things, their reps were consistently missing quota, losing deals on price, relying on discounts, and getting piecemealed by customers. What I mean when I say getting piecemealed by customers is that they have a product suite, right? Where you can buy like 4 different things from them, or you could just buy one of those 4 things. But the product really functions at its best if they buy the entire thing. And so what they were able, so what was happening was like, even though the maximum value a customer could extract would be buying the entire suite, they were having a lot of customers just choose one thing. And so they were essentially having to trade off value every time. Someone asked in the chat, what's G2? It is a software review site. So it's pretty popular. It may be more popular here in America, but basically it is unbiased reviews of software and ratings from actual customers and users. And so they've got a 4.9 out of 5. So again, according to the data, they were following the rules, right? They had that talk ratio and everything. But here's the situation. You can have the right talk ratio, right? You can talk for 45% and listen for 55%, but you could still be talking about the wrong things. You can ask the right number of questions, but still not get quality responses. And you can have a highly rated product, but that doesn't mean it's going to sell itself. Someone asked, does this apply only to SAD product demos? What if we are a general service? So I think it means SaaS product demos. What if we are a general service provider? A lot of this can still apply. If you are selling services, there's probably going to be just some slight modifications because you're not showing a product, but you can take a lot of this and it'll still apply to your situation. So that said, that's what was going on. And on top of that, their sales team, their AEs, their account executives had a lot of questions, right? From I've got status quo delaying or killing deals entirely, or I'm having to discount right away. How do I frame the pricing better? I'm dropping off in between calls. How do I stay top of mind? How do I get other stakeholders on board, right? Go ahead and in the chat, just let me know. You can kind of just do an abbreviated version of any one of these questions, but like which one of these has happened to you before, or which one of these questions have you been asking yourself before, right? Is it about like differentiation or addressing their needs or status quo, right? So if any of those things have been happening to you, just write like an abbreviated version of that in the chat. It's awesome to see, like, not awesome, I should say, but it's just, to me, it's very interesting to see how these issues are echoed a lot of times, like across an ecosystem, even if it's not even the same industry, but just because like that's the life of selling. And on top of that, it's not just that the AEs had a lot of questions, that leadership was just, it was hard for them to provide the right support, right? So Peter, as the CEO, is busy doing CEO things. The VP of sales, very focused on managing pipeline. And the marketing team was just not in tune with the day-to-day buyers. So anything that they were coming up with just wasn't really connecting in the right way and wasn't being leveraged by the sales team. So I'm like, okay, I think we can fix this, man. Like, I feel really good about being able to fix this because you have a strong product, right? Like your lead flow is there. We just have to like find the right message for them. And so that's what we're going to cover today is like, what do we actually do? And what can you do like from the second this call ends moving forward? So the 4 aspects we're going to cover here are the right mindset, the right messaging, the call flow that you need to institute, and the coaching and accountability. for repeatable, scalable demo call success. You got to have all these 4 things working well with one another. Okay. And that's why I'm covering all 4 of these things. And I've got a cool bonus we'll share with you if you stick around to the end as well. So with that said, let's dive into part 1, which is the mindset. Okay. I need everyone who's watching this right now to stop thinking like a business person. Stop thinking like an account executive. If you're in leadership, stop thinking like an executive leader, right? And instead, I want you to do something completely different. I want you to table that mindset, okay? Because what it's doing is creating boring demo calls. It's making your conversations just like lack energy, lack interest, and lack emotion. I always like to say this with anything that I put my hands on when it comes to content or selling or anything, right? If you've seen the movie Dirty Dancing, right? They say nobody puts baby in the corner, right? You want to be saying that to yourself. Nobody puts baby in the corner browser tab, right? You should not be running a demo to where they're half paying attention and they've actually like taken their mouse and moved you into a corner browser tab while they actually work on something else. And then they just kind of nod along the way as if they're paying attention, which happens more often than you might think. So tell that to yourself. Nobody puts baby in the corner browser tab. So stop thinking like an executive and instead think like an entertainer. The reason I say think like an entertainer is because an entertainer is concerned with one thing, and that is making an emotional connection with their audience, right? Get the audience to feel something, move them in some way. Right? The entertainer is entirely audience focused. So if you think like an entertainer, you'll become audience focused. Whereas if you think like an executive, then you're really product focused, and that's not where you want to be. A great sort of like analogy, or to continue this analogy further, a great way to think about it is when your favorite music artist takes the stage, what they don't do is say, "All right, it's great to be here tonight, everyone. So here's what's going to happen. Tonight, we're going to play every song in our entire catalog. It's like 12 songs an album and 9 albums total. We're not just going to stop there, though. We also want to play some of the rough drafts we've been working on in the basement, as well as some of the B-sides that maybe you're not so familiar with. And we also want to give you an idea of some of what's on our music roadmap over the next 6 months, just so you have a really clear idea of just how great tonight can be for you. It's probably going to take like 14 hours to get through it all. Who's with me? Right? Like even the most diehard fan is going to be like, yo, I got to go home and eat dinner at some point. Can you just play the hits, please? Right? And when you're an entertainer, like you create a set list designed around a particular emotion you want to leave your audience with when the night ends. So similarly, like you got to think through, like, what is your set list? What are your greatest hits? Right? What emotion do you want to send them off with? Right? That's going to put you in a much better position. So thinking like an entertainer, I think another way to just visualize this that I really like is this graphic. It's several years old at this point. It came from a company called User Onboard. You have small Mario, right? Super Mario, that's your potential customer. And you have the fire flower, that's your product. And you combine those two things together, you get big Mario on fire, shooting fireballs and stomping on bad guys. Most companies are selling the flower, when in reality, what they need to be doing is selling Mario on fire, shooting fireballs and stomping on bad guys, right? But what I'm seeing, again, because so many companies are product focused, they're thinking like an executive, they sell the flower. But you need to be audience focused. You need to think like an entertainer so you can sell the emotion, sell the better future state, sell the result for your customer. And if you're audience focused, it is not a product demo anymore. It's a brand experience. Okay. And we said that at the beginning, right? Like you can have a demo that turns people away, or you can design a brand experience. And when you're audience focused, just at a mindset level, now you're one step closer to creating a brand experience. But if your mindset isn't there, then you're just going to keep falling back to old patterns. So really, really tell yourself, think like an entertainer. In fact, maybe even, screenshot this slide and print it out, or you can Google search it, right? It's from this company, useronboard.com. Print it out and just put it, on top of your computer so you never forget what you're actually supposed to be selling. So that's the mindset. From there, let's move into part 2, which is all about the messaging, right? Specifically, what I want to focus on first is how you actually talk about your company. And specifically like an elevator pitch, right? This is a huge part of how your demo is going to run. And if you don't have this right, like a lot of the other stuff just gets, it just becomes more confusing to your potential customer, to your buyer, right? And I want you to just think through the way this is set up, I can't do like slide transitions. So I want you to just take a moment here, almost close your eyes. Maybe, I would say that. Close your eyes. And I'm asking you the question, what does your company do? Close your eyes. I'm just going to give like a 10-second pause here. I want you to just maybe say it out loud to your computer, or at least think through it. What's your answer to that question? What does your company do? Maybe it was kind of hard to think through what you would say there, right? Maybe you were just starting to formulate the thoughts. Maybe you had something, or maybe alternatively, you said like a quick one-line thing that didn't give enough information. So what I often hear is this like buzzword-filled thing. Something like, we're an award-winning AI-powered platform specializing in load delivery through the entire product lifecycle. We've worked with top brands across multiple industries with an average 50% increase in delivery and are backed by the same investors who funded Pinterest, Peloton, and PuppyLingo, like Duolingo, but for puppies, right? Obviously, that's a fake company, and I don't know what Duolingo for puppy. I guess we learned how to speak the language of dog, which would be pretty cool, right? But I'll hear something like that, loaded with buzzwords. It says a lot without saying anything at all. I was actually, a new customer of ours, I was just reviewing, I was doing their initial demo audit last week. And one of the things that I observed was when they had to explain what their company did, they spent 4 minutes giving that answer. And that's just a lot of information and way too long of a time. So here's how we're going to change that, okay? Instead, I want you to, and you can write this down, I want you to use this, because every call is going to have an elevator pitch in it, and you'll see how that fits into the call structure when we get to the next section, the call flow section. But I want you to understand the idea behind the messaging first, specifically around your elevator pitch. And it's this formula we came up with several years back, and we call it Que Pasa, Q-U-E-P-A-S-A. If you know Spanish, I see some Brazilians here, so it's probably the same in Portuguese. But in Spanish, Que Pasa means what's up or what's happening. And when you're giving your pitch, when you're talking about your company, that elevator introductory pitch, you just need to tell them what's up with your company. And so this is a special acronym that we came up with, and it's Que Pasa, okay? The Que Pasa elevator pitch formula, which PASA stands for problem, approach, solution, action. Problem, approach, solution, action. Problem, approach, solution, action. And I see someone in the chat saying elevator pitch equals what you do plus what problem you solve. It's actually the other way around. It's what problem you solve, therefore what you do. And the reason why this is such a influential and powerful approach to talking about your company is because by leading with the problem, you provide the appropriate context and frame of reference for why you're even existing in the first place. But most important, when you start with the problem, you lead with empathy. You put yourself on their side first. Remember, audience focused, right? You put yourself on their side. You said, I understand this is the way things are going today. I understand that's an issue. I understand that can be really tough to deal with. I get it. It sucks. Well, here's what we do about that to help. problem, approach, solution, action. Now, that's your base messaging, right? It's going to form your elevator pitch. And when you have the elevator pitch, right, it's going to influence all of your messaging beyond that. I want to show you how this fits within the call flow and the overall call flow structure as well now. So I'm going to transition now to part 3, which is the call flow. So we've covered mindset and we've covered messaging. Now let's get into call flow. First, let's talk about how demos that suck go, right? They go something like this. They start with a 100 level discovery that is pretty brief. What has you interested in us? Right? That's kind of like the lead question. Like, hey, like why, what were you searching to find us? Right? That kind of thing. It then leads into a boring demo that's very, very product focused, right? It's like a guided tour of your product with every pit stop along the way. And then that leads into inconclusive next steps, right? Where you're kind of asking, you're the seller asking the buyer, what are your next steps from here? And I'm sure a lot of you can resonate with asking that question at the end of the call. I'll show you in a little bit why that's ineffective. And then what I also noticed too is that demos that suck are scheduled for 30 minutes. The prospect shows up 5 minutes late. So now you've actually got 25 minutes. And then by minute 20, they're already thinking about the next meeting they have to run to. So they've kind of mentally checked out. And then you end up running out of time because they showed up late and they have a meeting they have to get to right after. Like you run out of time and then you're like, okay, like what are your next steps from here? And they're like, okay, all right, email us this. And you're like, okay, great. I'll email you and just get back to me, right? And then you have like no control over the sales process. And that's not a position you want to be in. So let me show you now like the step-by-step call flow that you should be instituting instead. You start with setting a mutual agenda. That transitions into delivering an impactful point of view statement. From there, you take on what I call 300 level discovery or advanced discovery, which then leads into your K-Pasa elevator pitch and your pitch deck. The pitch deck sets up your demo and your actual software like demonstration. And you're going to employ what I call the reverse demo technique. And then that creates collaborative next steps. And I'm going to go into each one of these points, but that's the overall structure. That's the overall call flow structure. And instead of 30 minutes, you're going to set those meetings for 40 to 45 minutes. If you're not doing that already, start doing that. It's going to give you more time, but perhaps best of all, a lot of people schedule a meeting to start at 12 p.m. and another meeting to start at 12:31 p.m., right? They schedule a 30-minute meeting. Very, very few people schedule meetings to start at 12:41 p.m. or 12:46 p.m., right? So if you give yourself, if you block off 40 to 45 minutes on the calendar for that call, you're giving yourself wiggle room. If they show up a couple minutes late, you've still got plenty of time. And if you need to run a little bit, ideally you're going to end the call on time, but if you run a little bit over time, guess what? You're not going to get booked in a back-to-back because their next meeting, if they've got one, is going to be at the top of the hour, not at 45 after. As well, the other aspect of this, if you do end on time, if you end at 12:40 or you end at 12:45, you've just given them 15 to 20 minutes back in their day. They can go to the restroom, they can grab some water, they can eat lunch, they can get back to their emails, right? So in all, you cover all your bases and you give yourself some time too. So you're not in back-to-backs. So now let's break down each one of these point by point. Let's start off with the mutual agenda. I want to first direct your attention towards the bottom of the slide, okay? So demos that suck, and when I say demos that suck, I really do mean most demos. They don't even set an agenda at all. They skip this part entirely. But the reason you want to set an agenda is so that you can establish a common goal up front and help keep the call on track, right? The agenda is not just to say, here's what's going to happen today. It also is going to secure an initial buy-in, right? Like you're both agreeing to the process for today. And so because you've both agreed to the process for today, they are more likely to want to they're more invested in paying attention all the way through because you've both made an agreement up front. The other reason why this is so valuable is because so many of the reps that we've worked with over the years have had issues with being able to secure next steps at the end of the call, like, something more healthy than just email us and we'll get back to you. And your agenda, like at the start of the call, the first 5 minutes of your call helps dictate the last 5 minutes of your call, because what you're going to include as part of this agenda is an idea of what next steps typically look like. So you'll give the agenda, and then you'll say, if things are looking well, if we both feel like there's a fit, typically what a next step would look like is blank, and it could be like a technical demo. It could be whatever it needs to be for your specific use case. And so you say, does that sound good to you? And they say, yeah, that does. Okay, great. So now in the first 5 minutes, you've just secured a next step as long as things go well on this call and as long as you both feel like there's a fit. So then when you get to the end of the call, and I'll get to this later, but I'll mention it here. When you get to the end of the call, what's awesome is you can say, hey, so earlier we said next steps would look like this. If there's a fit, do we feel like there's a fit? Yeah. Okay, great. Let's plan those out. Right. So you've covered yourself at the end of the call by making this part of the beginning of the call. So that's the mutual agenda. After you deliver the mutual agenda, which is just kind of an overview of how the call is going to run, then you're going to transition into your point of view statement. Okay. Demos that suck do not have a point of view. And I am here to tell you today that a product without a point of view is pointless, right? A product without a point of view is interchangeable. It doesn't matter. Like that's going to lead to a feature war and discounting and all that stuff. So what you need to do up front to set the right foundation for your conversation is use this point of view statement as a way to convey your company's stance and belief system about the industry. And I want to be clear, this should not be something that is about your product or your product features. It should be something that is higher level than that. It should convey a vision. So to give you a sort of idea of like at Startup Hypeman, like our point of view is very much centered around this. And you kind of got an idea of it when I told you about myself at the beginning of this broadcast. Our point of view is something along the lines of like, we believe that voice is the most important thing if a company really wants to make an impact in the market. Companies that don't figure out their voice end up becoming commoditized and lost in the noise. But the companies who do figure out their voice ascend to the top of their category and set the rules for everyone else. Right? So that's our point of view. I didn't talk about the product at all. I didn't know about the service offering that we provide. I just gave you the point of view. And what's awesome is then we can deliver that. And then we can open discovery by saying, I'm curious, how do you think about voice? And so what I've effectively done is I've tried to align with them on belief system. And what you can effectively do is work to align with them at a belief level first. Because if your belief system aligns, then you're going to be more like if you're the audience, if you're the buyer, you're going to think more favorably about the product when you see it, because there's a core belief that you agree on first, right? So you're working to secure some alignment up front with that beliefs, with that point of view statement, and use it as a way to tee up your discovery, right? Because think about how much different of a conversation you can have if the first question you ask is, what's your stance? What's your stance on X? Right? Now you're going to get into a more strategic discussion with them instead of like a very, very low level, like buttons and widgets, feature-y kind of conversation with them. So that's how you help set up your discovery. And now, just at a starting point, if you're doing 300 level discovery. I say 300 level because at least in the US education system, when you're at university, the introductory level is like the classes are numbered in the hundreds. And then as you get more advanced, they go up. So like a 300 level class would be very advanced. I'm not sure how it's done internationally, if it's the same kind of system, but that's what it is in the US. So when I say 300 level discovery, I mean advanced discovery. You're not just doing like, intro level stuff. And so, you use that point of view statement to help set this up. And then over the course of asking them questions, what you're essentially trying to do is you're seeking to understand their pain within the context of your overall company initiatives. And in this process, you're encouraging the buyer to qualify themselves. So one example of this would be like timing, right? Everyone wants to know timing. And the most common way I'll hear this asked in a demo is, so what's your timeline for implementing something like this? And, and it'll generate a response, but I think it's an incomplete response because it's not seeking to understand the overall company initiatives. So a better way you can ask that is, I'm curious, how come we're having this call today and we didn't have it like, I don't know, 2 months ago, and we're not having it like 2 months from now? When you ask a question like that, now they are going to tell you a story of the events that led to today, right? You're going to know you're going to know what was going on before and why they didn't, why they weren't reaching out or why they didn't take your meeting then. And then the events coming out of this that are leading up to whatever larger initiative that they have. And so now you're like, what that helps you do is be able to say back to them something like, oh, wow, okay. So you're saying you've got this thing happening over here. But there's this thing getting in the way, and it was getting in, you couldn't work on it before because of these issues going on, but now you can. But if you don't get this right, this might get bumped out further away. Oh, that seems like this is a pretty big deal. So now you've aligned your product, you've aligned, working with you to something bigger than just like a transaction. Okay. Let's move ahead to the next part, which is your elevator pitch and your pitch deck. So you do a thorough discovery, right? And I say thorough, like this should take up a good amount of time, right? You should be spending like 15 minutes here learning about them, maybe even 20 minutes. That's going to lead to now like really how you message your company. So you'll first give your Que Pasa elevator pitch, right? In the problem, approach, solution, action format. And that will lead into your pitch deck. Demos that suck have no concise way of introducing themselves. Like I said, company I was reviewing the other week, 4-minute introduction on what they do. That's way too long. So they don't have a concise way to talk about what they do, and they either have a bad presentation deck, and it's like a capabilities deck where it's like slide 1 is about us, slide 2 is our customers, slide 3 is our product, slide 4 is our executive team and our experience, et cetera. And then here's some case studies, right? That's a capabilities deck, or they don't use a deck at all. And I'm here to tell you, use a presentation and use a good presentation. Use one like what your presentation really should do is define your category. And what it is effectively doing is making a commentary on the state of the industry. And because the industry is a certain way or is becoming a certain way, it's requiring a company like theirs to make some serious decisions about where they want to fall or about, where they want to land as the industry makes these changes, right? It's a story it's bigger than just your product. It is a story about change. And making the case for why change is necessary. If you're curious, I have a totally separate workshop called Sales Presentations That Don't Suck. So all our stuff is branded as Don't Suck. But we have another one called Sales Presentations That Don't Suck that goes into the exact process to build a strong sales deck. So just keep an eye out for the next time that one's live. And Snowbio, perhaps at some point we can even get together and do that for this crowd as well. Right. So you'll use your presentation and what you're effectively doing here is getting them to buy in at an emotional level, right? Right. They agree on the concept and emotionally they buy in to what you're telling them, right? They buy into this continuation of that first belief system that you shared. And so the fact that they're bought in emotionally, remember we talk about think like an entertainer, right? Can you capture the emotion above all else? When you've captured their emotion, now when they see the product, they already kind of get it and they already feel kind of good about it. They have said to themselves, like, yeah, I can get down. I can agree with this enough times in their head that when they actually see the product, now instead of having to win on showing what your product does, showing the product is more of like a formality because they need some visual representation of the emotion and the concept that they've bought into. And when it's more of a formality, you don't have to spend so long demoing it. And so let's talk about that, right? The demos that suck are what I call the curious case of Benjamin's buttons. If you remember that movie, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. But it's the curious case of Benjamin's buttons, where you're like, okay, so this button does this. Here's how you set up this. Here's how you launch this campaign. And you kind of click on every single button that's there. And what it leads to is just like a lot of information, a lot of overwhelm, and something that appears chaotic. And it doesn't feel like it's simple and easy to use. But the first time someone sees something, they have got to walk away feeling like I could do that, right? They cannot walk away saying this seems like it's going to be a lot of work. They have to walk away feeling like I can do that. So the reverse demo technique is what you will deploy. In the reverse demo technique, you're just doing a light walkthrough of the product. You are intentionally leaving things out. Consider it the drive-through version of your product. Like if you were a restaurant, people could dine in or they could go through the drive-through. Your demo is the drive-through. They're not dining in. They're ordering through the drive-through. So you're going to intentionally leave things out. And the way you're going to make it seem so simple and linear and easy to use is you're going to work backwards from the end result. And this works especially well if you sell a product that has a like admin user that's different than an end user. So in an example like that, basically what you do is you would make yourself the end user. Like you would kind of like get into character and be like, let's say, let's say it's like payroll software or something. You could be like, okay, so let's say, I'm an employee at your company and I'm trying to check on my pay stub to make sure I'm getting paid this week and that my benefits are getting distributed appropriately. All I got to do is I head to this screen. It's, oh, perfect. Look, it's right there. Awesome. I actually didn't even have to email you about it to ask where it was. It was right there in front of me. And look, all the information I was looking for is here. And if I want to find anything else, it's over here. It's really that simple. And then you're like, and on your side, on the admin side, it's even easier to set up. You just do these two things. Boom, boom. So you see, like in that mode, you're able to connect your product to what they're trying to accomplish right away, right? Start from the end and work backwards into how it's done and make it, and like you do that, it'll be simple and linear, but don't get caught up in like all the other things they could possibly do. The reason I say that is because, and I know some of you are like, no, but like our product can do like these 4 other things that they do need to know about, right? Stick to the lead things that are important and know that you can always, as your next step, you can declare that your next step is a technical demo where they get the dine-in version of your product and you can go through everything. But at first pass, again, it has to feel easy. The more you show them, the less effective it is. So you do that reverse demo technique, and then you get to your next steps, right? And in demos that suck, again, I told you before, what I most often hear is you get to the end and then you ask the buyer, great, so what are your next steps from here? The challenge with that question is buyers often do not actually know what their next steps are. They may think they know, but they're not thinking through it the right way, right? And they're going to tell you, yeah, we got to talk internally and we'll get back to you. That's what you're going to hear 99% of the time. We'll talk internally and we'll get back to you. But what they've done is accidentally lumped everything that happens internally into a we'll talk and we'll get back to you. And so you got to trigger them the right way to give you a good thought process. And if they talk internally and get back to you, you're just left waiting around, right? That's how you get ghosted. Because if it's not a priority, if it's not something that that you're involved in anymore, it's really easy for them to deprioritize it and then never get back to you because they don't want to tell you no outright, even though they are saying no by not responding. So in a collaborative next steps, you should carve out like 5 minutes to get through this. This is where you as the seller assume control of the process and you pave the path for them moving forward. So you're like, great, and you call back to what you said at the beginning. You're like, okay, so great. So we said at the beginning, if this felt like a fit, that our next steps would be to schedule the technical demo. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay. And then you like pull up your calendar. Okay, great. Let's do next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Perfect. Who else needs to be on that meeting? Who else is going to feel left out if they're not in that meeting? Right. Now you start to get other people involved who need to be there. And then you schedule that and you say, okay, great. And just to give you an idea, so the technical demo is what comes next. And then just from that point forward, here's how customers typically buy from us. We have that. And then this thing happens. We do an IT review, and then there's this thing, right? And so you basically, you tell them the full process to getting to the point of a purchase. And then you're going to say, great. So does that that's how customers typically buy from us. How does that align with how you typically make purchase decisions? How does that align with how you typically like to buy things? And now you've given them something to bounce off of, right? You've told them your framework, which is going to help them think through what is their true framework. Who is all the people who needs to be involved? When does legal get involved? That kind of stuff. And essentially what you're trying to figure out is, are you here? Are you here? Or are you here? And if you're not here, what do you need to do to get to here? Also, another big part of this is you want to divide responsibilities. So often I'll see a seller will agree to like 5 follow-up items that they're going to send or research. And in return, all they're getting from the buyer is, great, I'll keep an eye out for that and I'll get back to you afterwards. But you're committing to so much work, and they're not even willing to commit to even getting back to you at a certain point. So what you should be doing when you set these collaborative next steps is assign some responsibility or task for them. Hey, what I want you to do, so we're going to meet next week, but before then, what I want you to do is watch this webinar our company created. It's only like 20 minutes. You can watch it in 1.5x speed. But I want you to see that because that's going to actually really impact if you see that first, it's going to make the technical demo run so much smoother, and it'll actually save some time. Right. So that's an example of how you could assign them a responsibility. Okay. That is our call flow for repeatable, scalable, badass demos. Mutual agenda, impactful point of view statement, 300 level discovery, elevator pitch and pitch deck, reverse demo technique, and collaborative next steps. And again, you're going to do that in 40 to 45 minutes. Now, the final thing I want to share with you all is the last part of the entire demo system, which is coaching and accountability. Okay. And I want to just quote, for any of you who are basketball fans, there was a popular basketball player in the late 90s and early 2000s named Allen Iverson. And one day he didn't show up for practice. It was a big deal. And the media got on him about it. And he was like, how the hell can I make my teammates better by practice? Now, he was wrong, because practice is what helps, right? Practice is what gets good behaviors going. You can't expect to win a bunch of games by never going to practice. And so similarly, to be successful, reps just need more than pipeline review. So if you are a leader who's watching this right now, you need to have more than just pipeline review meetings. You need to be providing real support, real coaching, and real feedback. Otherwise, it's like you're expecting a basketball team to win every game without ever showing up for practice. So you need to set aside coaching meetings. And when we work with companies, we'll build that story stack, but then we'll do monthly demo coaching. And our system is every month the reps will tag us in one of their calls. We'll review it. We'll leave notes on it. We will then schedule a one-on-one meeting to provide the feedback privately. And then once a month, we have what we call a team game film review, where we get the entire team together and we all watch one call together. And it's like that person's feedback session is now live in front of everyone else. And we give others an opportunity to chime in on what they would do in that situation, or where they might be confused in that situation. So it's a really good shared learning experience. We found a lot of success with it. You can borrow that exact coaching template, and I promise it'll work. So there you have it, everyone. That's our system for demos that don't suck. It's the mindset, the messaging, the call flow, and the coaching and accountability. And the key is you've got to have all of these, okay? Because you could have, like, if you don't have the right mindset, your messaging is going to be screwed up, right? You could have the right call flow, but the wrong messaging. And so then it's not going to matter. And you could do the first three things, but if you don't have a system to like consistently see how people are performing and making them better, you'll fall back into old patterns real quick. So let's come like that. This is what we did with SearchSpring and Peter. So like, let's kind of come back and see like what happens when you do install a system like this at your company, right? Because again, if you do this, you're going to go from product demo to brand experience, which means you're going to turn buyers into champions who evangelize your cause. And that positions you as a category leader. And you should all be striving for your companies to become category leaders, right? You should be striving to not like, you shouldn't care about being the best. You should care about being the only. Because when you are the only, that's where you're not going to deal so much with discounting and feature battles and all that crap. That's when they will aspire to work with you. So then when your demo calls don't suck, like what can happen? Well, you could be like Brittany, a senior enterprise AE at Blueboard, right? She installed this into her calls. She said afterwards, our SDR shadowing the call said, "You effing murdered it. One of the best demos I've ever seen. Definitely top 10 of all time." Or you could be like William, an AE at Engagedly, who said, "Hey, just want to send some fire your way. Just close out the quarter at 140% to goal." And it was a true mid-market level goal. But what about Peter and SearchSpring, right? That was the base company we started with. And he said, selling through demos is horrible. We're always caught in a feature battle. Well, we created that story stack. We installed this demo system. And here's where his team grew to. You had Steven, who was like, "Hey, it used to be overwhelming. Now we're able to give something for the prospect to visualize and work towards." And over the past 3 months, I've done 105%, 195%, and 200% of quota. Or Deontay, "Hey, when I transitioned from SDR, first I did 50% of quota. Then the next month I did 149%. Or Travis, who's their head of sales, who said, "Hey, not sure if you heard about this yet, but we just had a new record for MRR in a month." And then on top of that, what I love is that Peter himself, the CEO, ate his own words because he bet them last year. Their board of directors set a huge goal for them for quota. And he was like, "Guys, this is gonna be tough. Okay, it's not gonna be easy." And someone said, "If we do this, will you let one of us pie you in the face?" He said, "Yeah, of course, no problem." He was not expecting to get pied in the face, but he literally had to eat his own words because he took a pie to the face. That unfortunately it's not showing up because this is the way the broadcast works for this. But that's a looping GIF of him taking the pie to the face. So I want you all to take a pie to the face because you're doing so successful, right? Like you're doing more successful than you even bet on, right? That's the position you should strive to be in. And that's where you can be in if you install a demo system like this. A couple of housekeeping items before I get into final questions. As a follow-up, I'm going to send you a cheat sheet on how to set agendas, right? We mentioned part one of this process is the mutual agenda. I'm going to send you a cheat sheet on just exactly how you can set that up. Okay. And here is my contact information. If you want to reach out, again, this is something we work with companies on every week. We got a lot of experience in it. We've reviewed, again, over 100 calls over the last few years. And we know how to do this well. And perhaps there's a way we can help you as well. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. And there's my email address, and follow us on Instagram at Startup Hypeman. So that's what I'll leave you with, right? Like the demo can be your dance floor, right? If you think like an entertainer, the demo should be your dance floor. Bad moves will leave you dancing alone. So instead, I think you should step up, take the lead, and rock the dance floor. Let's get into some questions now, yeah?
Yeah. Thank you, Rajiv, for this amazing workshop. There's lots of information to think about, to look at the demo that we perform every day, analyze, and make some improvements. Yeah, before we go to the questions that ladies and gentlemen asks us in the chat, I have a question. What is the most common mistake salespeople do while demoing? What do you think? And what examples do you have in your own experience while
Yeah.
working with your clients?
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned them throughout, right? So common mistakes would be how you ask about next steps, right? Just being like, oh, great. So what are your next steps from here? I see a lot of like oversharing or over pitching, right? So especially when you're in that software demo, you have to control the scroll, right? Once you start like clicking around too much, then you get them thinking about things that aren't relevant anymore, right? If you show them all this stuff over here that's not, that it doesn't really affect their purchase decision. Now they start asking questions about that, and it's just distracting. Those are some of the big things. The other thing I would say is like spend some thorough time in discovery, like make sure you know what their pains are. And then you use that, like weave that into your messaging, then weave that into how you're demoing, right? It's a lot better if you can show your software and say, remember how earlier you said this thing was a challenge? Let me show you exactly how you can address that. And then you can tie everything you show back to, a pain point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the question that we have, one of the first, what was your worst demo experience?
Okay, so it wasn't like a true demo in the sense of like software, but it was like it was like a final meeting with a customer. And I tell this story in that other workshop, Sales Presentations That Don't Suck. But basically, I had an opportunity. I was pitching a multi-million-dollar program to one of the most popular international television shows of all time. And this was like very early in my career. And it went so bad that we had this terrible, our presentation was like an extended capabilities deck. And we were pitching to the executive producer of the show. Like that person's there. They have the first name in the credits at the end of the show, which was crazy. And it was so bad that they spent 15 minutes when we were done, essentially just like beating us up, being like, this was BS. This was wrong. I don't even know where you got this assumption from. This does not represent us at all. And they sent us home packing. That was definitely the worst experience I've had.
Thank you. The next question, how do you overcome the resilience of buyers to work with your company because it doesn't have a big brand name?
That's a great question. I think, this applies regardless, but especially in those situations, you got to get it down to the individual level of story, right? So it's not about the fact that Disney has worked, you don't have Disney on your client roster, but talk about the story of an individual user of your software and how things have changed for them. The more you can get into the micro, the better conversations you're going to have, because it's actually going to be more relatable to the person you're talking to. If you can get down to that like one-to-one level of storytelling. And the other thing I would say too is have a point of view, right? When you have a point of view, you're no longer the template for the conversation is not product. It's a belief system. And I've been saying this a lot in some different outlets recently. You really need to consider what I call like the religion of your brand, right? The most successful brands in the course of human history are the world religions. They have survived. They've survived globalization, population changes, right? They've survived like famine, economic changes, but they keep getting bigger and bigger because people are aligned to a belief, a larger belief at the end of the day. And your point of view, I want to just make sure I clarify. If you are a individual seller who's watching this right now, your point of view should not be coming from you specifically. It should be a company level discussion, right? Like your CEO and your executive team should be forming the company's point of view, which then gets funneled out through you. And if you haven't heard that before, ask your leadership, hey, what is our company's point of view on the industry? And see what they say.
Thank you. Next question. I feel like my prospect doesn't want to leave the status quo. In what process I may be doing wrong? So
I feel like
how
my
to
prospect doesn't want to leave the status quo. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for shifting off status quo is going to be that presentation that you give, the pitch deck, where you architect a story of change, right? You talk about the way things are moving in the industry. And as a result, people need to be making decisions differently today than they were, however many years ago or however many months ago. When you can tell that bigger story, it kind of puts them in a situation. And again, there's a whole nother workshop where you can learn the details of this, but basically you get them to say to themselves, I never thought of it like that before. Wow. Okay, we really need to be thinking about this differently. Okay, let's keep talking. Right? You teach them something about their own situation, and when you do that, they start thinking less and less about the status quo.
Yeah, we have an amazing comment, by the way, here. Here in Brazil, the problem is most part of the leads do not answer you after the video call or meeting. Brazilian people do not know how to say no, but I think that's not only Brazilian people.
I think it's people. Yeah.
Any piece of advice how to avoid that?
Yeah, so definitely towards the end of that call, secure those next steps. And again, at the beginning of the call, state what your next steps would be if things are going well. So lock in that pull up your calendar on a screen share while they're on the call and book that next meeting. And if you still feel like you're getting people who don't show up or whatever, what you should do as well is tell them, I'm going to send you a follow-up email as well. If for whatever reason, if that doesn't work for you anymore, all you have to do is just cancel the meeting. Don't even worry about sending me an email. Just cancel the meeting. I'll know why it's not, I'll know because of the things we talked about, why you need to push it. So don't even worry about that. And then what's awesome is if they do cancel the meeting, you can then send a follow-up and just be like, hey, saw you canceled. As we discussed, I'm going to assume it's because of these reasons. Would love to just, we're doing some research at our company. Would love to just get on a call for 5 minutes to learn, where things are for you. And just kind of like, I'm not going to sell you. I'm not going to pitch you. I just want to learn from you.
Yeah, many thanks, Rajiv. That was really amazing. So many thanks. Thanks to everyone who joined us. If you have any other questions, you can always connect with Rajiv on LinkedIn and ask them there. I want you to share the stream with your friends and colleagues, like it, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more expert content. Have a good one and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.